begs Ministry of Agriculture to release assorted food items to vulnerable Nigerians free of charge. Is that Rocco?
Senate meets security chiefs over current security situation.
And NNPC Limited inaugurates host communities board of trustees.
And on Good Morning Nigeria today, we shall discuss the collapse of the national electricity grid.
All right, so if you have electricity power supply in your area at this time, you may be among the lucky ones. But the true picture is that Nigeria has for a while now been experiencing several challenges, of course, with her electricity grid. And we all know what's been happening. It's been invariably, of course, led to grid collapse and partial or total collapse, of course, in different parts of the country within the past 2 years.
Indeed, and last year, there were 3 of such incidents clear that led to nationwide blackouts. And this month, Nigerians had a feeling of deja vu when the grid collapsed again, throwing the entire country into darkness.
You know, I think it's even more than three national grid collapse last year. If you count,
I think it was more.
Much more than that. Yes, more. Yes, was more than that.
And at a time like this, when there is heat.
Yes, of course. You know. Okay, so we're counting the numbers, and according to the data we have from the Transmission Company of Nigeria, TCN, it's okay. Let me just read it out to you. It says the grid collapsed at about 11 o'clock. Leading to a drop in the system capacity from 2,407 megawatts to 31 megawatts, of course, by midday and 0 by 11 p.m. We don't know exactly what day this is. I think this might be, of course, very, very recent.
Yeah.
Yes, very recent.
And the TCN explained that the decline in available generation to gas constraints, which directly impacted the volume of bulk power available for transmission to distribution centers nationwide.
And the TCN has also come out to say, well, we're sorry, apologize to Nigerians, and explain that the grid was restored thereafter. And of course, industry watchers are not quite happy. They've expressed discontent over what they say are very frequent incidents of these happenings and the inconveniences, they inflict not just on Nigerians, but of course on companies and on the overall economy of the country.
And it's even more difficult, so much so that there are more questions than answers. People are wondering for how long will we continue to experience this kind of grid collapse intermittently.
Victor, sometimes I think our understanding of grid collapse also affects the way we view and explain these occurrences. But technically, this is a technical event that may not just be something that we can resolve overnight. It will probably take some time, take some fiscal or even monetary policies, to address.
Indeed, you talk about availability of gas and all of that, but the big one is, for how long? When will this issue be cleared? The issues be cleared up so that we can enjoy electricity supply consistently.
Well, one thing you certainly we should be assured of is that the power managers are not are not folding their arms. Yesterday, the Minister of Power held a press conference to explain certain things and what happens when there is a grid collapse. And again, you'd be amazed to know that we also have our own responsibilities in the whole system. So if we begin to address each stage of the value chain in the Greek collapse,
And government is saying via the Minister of Power that subsidy cannot continue in that sector. So we are back where, the issue of subsidy again, subsidizing gas, subsidizing...
You went here yesterday. During our press paper review, we talked about that. Of course, it was consequent upon the advice from the IMF. The IMF have come to say, look, Nigeria, this is not the time that you apply subsidy to electricity. It's hurting your economy, and it's advising that it should be removed totally and all that. And Chukwudi Okodigbaja, Demola and I were like, okay, fine. This is an advice, but again, the country would have to look at the scenario, the economic situation, the level of poverty, and so many indices, before taking a decision on that. But surprisingly, yesterday, the minister during the press conference said that, look, we can no longer shoulder subsidy
because
in the electricity.
Debts in trillions of
precisely. Anyway, these are some of the issues we will take up this morning on today's edition of Good Morning Nigeria. And as always, we are happy to have you with us. Like we say, this is a program that keeps you high. It's the best drink to start your early morning. I am Claire Adelabu Abdul-Razak. Welcome to the program.
Right, and I am Victor as well. I join Claire to welcome you also to the program. You know that we will bring you our complementary segments, notably the business segments. There will be sports later. Of course, in between, Chukwudi Okodigbaja will be here with the paper review, and there will also be foreign Claire.
Indeed. All right, so
for now,
and Juvenile, who of course is Dublin this morning. She has different feathers on her shoulders this morning, but she's bringing us highlights of the morning news. And I call her Princess Anne. Good morning.
Good morning, Claire. And Victor, good morning. Nigeria has the news. The Senate has expressed optimism that managers of Nigeria's security will do the needful to address the current issues in the sector. This was while interfacing with service chiefs and heads of security agencies for about 9 hours. The Senate's President, Godswill Akpabio, drew attention to the need for concerted action to step up the battle against criminality in the country in order to checkmate acts of terror on Nigerians.
Interaction of more than 9 hours bordering on reported killings, kidnapping and other criminal activities bedeviling the country, Senate President Godswill Akpabio reads the resolutions.
The Senate listened to the efforts of the security chiefs, particularly the serious improvement in their operations nationwide. The Senate was impressed that almost 90% of perpetrators of heinous crimes in the country, including the ones recently reported in Buhari, in Abuja, have been apprehended. The Senate thereafter commends Mr. President for his determination and focus on ensuring the security of lives and properties.
The Senate also recommends.
Now, President Tinubu's directive to the Ministry of Agriculture to release assorted foodstuff for strategic reserves has raised a lot of questions on the lips of many. Most Nigerians are saying when, where and how the food items will be distributed are some of their concerns. The Minister of Agriculture and Food Security has provided answers to these questions.
In line with our Restore Trust and Amplify policies and programs pillars, the first 2 pillars I talked about earlier, this is a chance for you, the distinguished members of the press, to engage with senior officials of government on behalf of the good people of Nigeria. You will hear firsthand about what the federal government is doing, the policies it is putting in place, programs, targets, and their objectives, and you'll be able to ask questions and receive relevant clarifications.
The minister said.
Meanwhile, the Northern Traditionals Council has resolved to engage relevant stakeholders, including governments at all levels, security agencies, traditional and local community leaders to address the escalating living costs and insecurity in the northern part of the country. Chairman of the Northern Traditional Rulers Council and Sultan of Sokoto, Mohammed Saad Abubakar, at the 6th edition of the Council's Executive Committee meeting in Kaduna, says the joint effort would be more effective in finding lasting solutions.
Because we work with them, there is that communication between us and them, and we always try to reach out to them.
States in the north must forge strong partnerships on security and other developmental issues and concerns. Agriculture, power and infrastructure, especially roads, are critical areas where we must collaborate to revitalize our economies and address the challenges of poverty and insecurity.
The traditional rulers are...
As the bedrock of any development, Nigeria must prioritize sound foundation for the education of her children. This is the position of the House of Representatives. This was the position, rather, during a debate on a motion seeking to address the problem of out-of-school children in the country.
Enugu State. Orders are being used to establish Federal University of Science and Technology, Remo.
Meanwhile, in line with the Petroleum Industrial Act, the Board of Trustees of the oil mining leases have been inaugurated by the Nigerian National Petroleum Company Exploration and Production Limited, subsidiary of NNPC Limited, in order to deepen host communities' participation.
The chairpersons of the Board of Trustees committed to.
Well, that's the news for now. We thank you for joining us. Good Morning Nigeria continues shortly with Claire and Victor.
All right, it's time for newspaper review, and Chukwudi Okolubaja is seated already.
All right, before we do that, on what side of the bed did you get up this morning?
They got too much sugar in his tea, so he's excited. Extra. It's okay. It happens in the day's job, man.
You know what they say about the laws?
Yeah.
The laws are made for man.
Not man for law.
So sometimes you can be very flexible.
Go occasionally, my dear.
It's completely normal. To get to the issues.
All right, Chukwudi, well, let's welcome you properly. Good morning and happy new day to you.
Same to you.
Yes. Okay, get a paper.
All right. And the Daily Trust is here. And just below the masthead, 3 stories. One on page 11, 60 reps propose bill to return Nigeria to parliamentary system. That's on page 11. And on page 30, Upstream Commission transfers over 200 staff to Lagos. Page 25, amid economic hardship, Trust Radio brings joy to lovers. Okay, lovers. That's Valentine related. And the main story here is captioned Hardship, Nigeria sitting on keg of gunpowder. That's according to the Sultan. With 3 riders will distribute 42,000 metric tons of grains for free, FG tells citizens. No crashing food prices is better, experts. And then, can NBA demand concrete action? And finally, on that story, Zulum Abiodun Sanwo-Olu unveil measures. And just below that, you have a picture story displaying arms and ammunition. Military busts gun factory in Plateau. And under it, finally, we have headers kill 1, burn 146 houses in Yobe, page 30. FIRS faults Buhari's 2.59 trillion naira tax credit scheme on road construction. That's on page 10. And power supply threatened as FG owes gas companies discos 3 trillion naira.
Okay, the leadership also had some sorrows and it's leading with the northern leaders worried over state of the nation. Details of that, it's on page 4. And the riders to that story, sorry, I just like to take a mic tea. The riders to that story say insecurity, poverty, plaguing our people. Arrest situation before Nigeria explodes, Sultan warns. Stop asking us to be patient, Catholic bishop tells President Tinubu. And just on the right-hand column, we have Reps proposed parliamentary system of government. It's on page 4. Electricity subsidy rises from 1.6 trillion naira to 2.9 trillion. Details of that on page 8. And Minister Wike places 20 million naira bounty on 2 kidnapped kingpins, and details of that you can find on page 13. And of course, this story is one of the highlights in our morning news this morning. Hardship: vulnerable Nigerians to get grains free of charge. That's according to the federal government. And just a little above the nameplate, you have student loan scheme to take off in 3 weeks, coming from the Chief of Staff, Gbajabiamila Miller, and CBN raises customs duty rate by 2.6%. Of course, fifth time in 2024. That's the 5th time in this year alone. All right, so let's bring in Chukwudi Okoli Ugbaja. Chukwudi, what's your pick now?
Subsidy on electricity, you said? Rises from 1.6 trillion to 2.9 trillion. So you see the actual cost of the subsidy, supposed subsidy, you see, we journalists, if you have not proved it to us, we have a way of being a bit skeptical. That's the way we work. It's been calculated. So what makes you shudder next is, what next? How do we defray? Is it eventually going to be passed on to the consumer? How long will it take before that happens? How ready would the people be? For instance, when you talk about government needing money from taxation, from revenue generation and all that, what comes to your mind is, what is the state of the pockets of the people who are going to pay the tax? All these must go together.
Your questions, yes, most of them, were answered yesterday by the Minister of Power, yes, Adebayo Adelabo, in the press conference he held yesterday. Okay. And just to let you know, we talked about whether or not the time was ripe for us to take off electricity subsidy. Yes. And we said the government needed to look at the economic situation and all that. But the minister was categorical yesterday to say that, look, we can no longer shoulder subsidy on electricity. It has to go. Yes, said it has to go. Of course, with the decentralization of power generation, to the state government, he said the state governments can now or should now begin to generate, electricity to their respective states. That will defray the cost, yes, and the burden. So again, it will appear that the federal government may toe the line of the IMF. If you remember, we talked about it yesterday, and some people are criticizing the IMF, are saying IMF is not interested in our growth, it's not interested in the development of those countries, but bringing out policies that will kill the economy. And I don't really subscribe to that.
Nobody, I don't think anyone in their right senses would say that the IMF is not interested in our growth.
Let me read that to you.
The IMF may not know the nitty-gritty of our domestic problems. Mm-hmm. So when they theorize over there, you need to domesticate the process of, because you don't want to become a pariah in the world. Mm-hmm. You will listen to the IMF. But then China does not
also have to consider
fully comply with IMF. They are doing well.
Yes, but sustainable here and now, because if you have to add additional burden at this time on the people,
yes, and
on the people now.
Yes, but you know that China is also not operating full. It's not a full capitalist economy.
No, it's not.
Yes, so that's why.
Actually, a friend of mine argued that China operates the harsh form of capitalism. If a business is not doing well in China, they kill it. You don't pamper it into whatever. No, that's harsh. and see how that has helped them. So sometime in the world you have to face realities. If subsidy has to go on electricity, it has to go at a point, because it's all part of overall growth. What we are saying is the modus operandi, the method of bringing it into effect and all that, bearing in mind the state of Nigerians. Look at the Sultan. It's saying there, Nigeria sitting on a keg of gunpowder. Traditional rulers don't talk anyhow. The other day, an emir in the north told the first lady, please tell the president that people are in pains and all that. It's not as if they don't know, but that was his personal way of saying, please, it is got that bad. So they're all coming together for dear country. The most important thing to me always is how you say it. What you say to me does not matter. It's how you say it. So let us say it in such a way that the presidency, the lawmakers, the judiciary, the 40 states of the realm, even us, would feel that we are being appreciated as we face the problems of the country. It's very important.
I want to believe that those who are advising the Mr. President in terms of economic policies, yes, fiscal and monetary policies, and programs, are aware of the current living condition of Nigerians, and I want to believe they are also technocrats. But the concern is really that some of these policies appear on paper to be good policies, but the impact yet is yet to be felt.
Yes,
it's yet to be felt.
But action is being taken.
Action is being taken.
Again, following the trail I started earlier, we are talking about the harsh conditions we're going through. You also need to recognize that 42,000 metric tons of grain has been released from the strategic reserve to ease creeping hunger. The items are going out free to the needy and vulnerable. The other time we were speculating about whether it would be free or,
But you say
now there are other measures. Please let me just finish this. Recapitalization of the Bank of Industry, Agriculture rather, provision for National Agriculture Fund, subsidy for fertilizers, capturing of farmers and their geographical location. So it's not just immediate action. I said, what you ate yesterday is important because it has helped nourish you up till the moment. What you eat today is equally important because it sustains what has been started yesterday. But the most important thing in life is the future. How you plan in the future. Remember the AFDD man now, that's additional. Remember his e-wallet, how it worked. Fertilizer that was no longer available to people. How much of that leaf are we borrowing in terms of distribution?
Now that you have talked about, the agric man, that's what I call him. Remember, he also initiated the cassava bread.
I thought he was in a bow tie. Yes, that was not going to do much.
The cassava bread.
Yes.
Now a loaf of bread, is going between some 1,000, 1,500.
It's 1,500.
1,500. So whatever happened to the loaf of bread? Only God knows. About just before we let you go,
Victor is lucky. He doesn't eat bread.
Yes, before we let him go, I wanted to take a moment to pay tribute to the late Asaba of Asaba. And sometimes when people become traditional rulers, it has a way of fading out the achievements of the individuals. The late Prof was the first black dean of the University of Ibadan College of Medicine. A prof at 36, he had his person before he became traditional ruler, and I think we could just...
a most erudite scholar and a very introspective advisor. They talk from the shadows, but they always have impact.
Okay, just the final one from me. It's on the modality for distributing the 42,000 grains to the vulnerable. And I hope that, I don't know, because when you ask what is the, how do you disaggregate who is vulnerable or who, and the answer is there's a social register. And this is a social register that has been in contention. So I think this is where the concern of Nigerians now will dwell in.
All right, thank you very much.
Don't let them give you a bad name in the distribution.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the time. And we'll take a break now. Good Morning Nigeria returns in a moment.
All right, welcome back to the program. If you've just joined in, you're right on time. You've not missed much, but we will begin our conversation after we played this background report for you, and it's on grid collapse, national electricity grid collapse. It's put together by our correspondent, Ibrahim Dan Amidu.
Nigeria's energy supply suffered another setback on Sunday, 4th of February 2024, in the morning, where the power grid slumped from about 3,852 megawatts to as low as 31 megawatts till noon on the first weekend of the month. Electricity is vital to the economic growth and development of any country, but in Nigeria, the power sector is still grappling with many challenges, which include incessant instances of grid disruption. Although the national power grid was fully restored from the blackout after hours that day, electricity consumers say the ongoing cases of grid collapse is an embarrassment, stressing that it is time now for the power sector to figure a way out. The industry tally shows that the national electricity grid has collapsed more than 100 times since the partial privatization of the power sector in 2013. Furthermore, the Nigerian transmission company TCN, which manages the grid, attributes the recent grid collapse to disruptions at the Sapele and Egbim power plants, which resulted in a loss of more than 300 megawatts. According to TCN, the shortage of gas supply to power generation companies, which is currently affecting power generation, is also another factor responsible for the recent system collapse. Reforms have been suggested to be introduced in the face of all this considerable disturbance, where stakeholders advocate the need for a SCADA system, meaning supervisory control and data acquisition, to monitor and control power plants and equipment in industries capable of decentralizing the grid as measures to prevent further collapse, while appealing to Nigerians to join the campaign against vandalism in the energy infrastructure, which is also another challenge to the sector. Guests on Good Morning Nigeria will knuckle down by discussions on one of Nigeria's titanic and intractable burdens, which is the collapse of the national grid. What way out?
All right, thank you very much, Ibrahim and Hamidu, for that background report. And seated right here with us in the studio is Idris Mohammed, who is a consultant power infrastructure specialist. Welcome to Good Morning Nigeria.
Good morning, Nigeria.
All right, we also have with us here in the studio Kunle Kola-Olubiyo, who is president of the Nigeria Consumer Protection Network. He was a member Presidential Committee on Review of Electricity Tariff in Nigeria 2020 and member National Technical Investigation Panel on Power System Collapses, System Stability and Reliability. Kunle, welcome to the program.
Thank you. Yeah.
Claire.
Okay, and we have two officials from the Transmission Company of Nigeria, TCN. First, we have Dr. Edmond Ejay, Acting Executive Director, System Operations, Transmission Company of Nigeria, TCN. Dr. Ejay, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
We also have here in the studio Engineer Kabiru Mohammed Adamu. He's the General Manager, System Planning and Development of the Transmission Company of Nigeria, TCN. Engineer Kabiru Mohammed Adamu. I don't want to make that mistake. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Claire.
Yes.
Good morning, Nigerians.
All right, we'll start from both of you, obviously. Let me start with Dr. Edmond Ejay, who is the Acting Executive Director. Just what is happening? You know, so sometimes maybe you want to enlighten us more on what is meant by, you know, national grid collapse, because sometimes when we hear, the lay people, when we hear grid collapse, you know, the picture we have is that, oh, maybe those, you know, gigantic
have dropped.
Yes, you know, have all collapsed to the floor. So maybe you need to enlighten us before we look at the other issues.
Yeah, thank you so much. It is my pleasure
having this platform. I think it will offer TCN the platform to do some explanation, because there has been a lot of misconception out there trying to explain what is a system failure, system collapse, system disturbances, and all the rest of them. For the layman in the street, anytime there's no power, what they readily call is a TCN. TCN. Everybody calls TCN as if TCN is the only operator in the value chain. But permit me to do this explanation. Now, you see this light we are seeing here is stable at this moment. What it means is that the equilibrium of supply and demand matches. What that by extension means again is that the generator's output, the transmission evacuation capacity at this time, and the consumption taken by the distribution companies are in equilibrium. At any time, at any point in time, this equilibrium is disturbed by so many factors, some of which I am going to mention. Now you begin to have what we call system disturbances. Now, by talking about a shifting in equilibrium, once the supply increases more than the demand, there is a frequency roaming. That frequency roaming means that the system is no longer stable, and it is the onerous tax for the system operator to begin to battle.
Sorry. I would implore you not to go too technical, so that we'll understand.
Okay.
When supply is more than demand, what happens, and what does that mean in terms of what?
Okay.
You just said something now.
Good. When supply is more than what is required or what is consumed, there's instability. And what that means is that now we have stability. We reference that stability as soon as there's a load drop at the consumer's end, be it that a distribution company wants to manage its load, or there is an unforeseen circumstance whereby there is network disturbance and they drop load. Now what it means is that generator is generating more than what the distribution companies want. Now there's system instability. The system operator has that task of stabilizing it, time bound. We're talking about in seconds. And then the system operator would now ask the generator, please ramp down your generator to match the demand at that particular time. Vice versa. If again the generator drops load by one reason or the other, it means the supply is less than the demand. There's instability. There is a wavering of the frequency. The system operator has to make sure that timelessly the equilibrium is maintained again by asking some of the distribution companies to drop load. Naturally, when some of these distribution companies are given the instruction to drop load to maintain equilibrium, some of them will not oblige. And that comes when the transmission company of Nigeria will mobilize what we call under-frequency relay. This under-frequency relay automatically cuts off some of the star feeders that are likely to be overloaded. Ones that are sensitive to the reference frequency set on that particular circuit to maintain equilibrium. Now, I will go further to say, why should a generator drop load? It is important to go to this depth so that everybody will understand what is system failure and
before you go to that next step.
Yes.
So what you're telling us now is that whenever we hear grid collapse, it's all about the inconsistencies in the equilibrium of the load.
God bless you. That's it.
No, Clay, I'm sorry.
You got confused somewhere.
I have heard equilibrium. He has mentioned equilibrium close to 10 times. But let me ask, like the market woman would probably ask.
Market man.
Well, market man. Why do you have to maintain equilibrium in such a way that it affects output? What I mean by that is, if we don't feel it at home, we don't care whether you maintain equilibrium or not. Why not maintain? What are the problems? What are the factors militating against maintaining that equilibrium at a point where we can have power supply? That's what matters to the market man and market woman.
Good. If the system is generating 3,000 or 4,000 megawatts, and at that particular time, the entire Nigeria is consuming 4,000 megawatts, and a generator drops 500 megawatts. Now we are left with what? 3,500 megawatts. Now there is a reason why that drop comes. So the system operator makes sure that what is demanded at that time should also be equal to 3,500 megawatts, or the system would, go haywire. So that's what we are talking about. There's no magic.
The system will trip off.
Yeah, the system will
That's
trip
why
off.
we need to know why. The first thing you explained is if something drops, why must it drop?
Good. I'm coming to that. I will explain.
Yes, because he's still trying to get us to understand what a grid collapse means. And he's talked about the load shedding, and the equilibrium thing. So we understand now that once there's total blackout, it's either the load has dropped, there's no equilibrium in the load that you're distributing. So we understand that. Any other factor?
Good. I will tell you that a generator that is bound to make profit, get its output and post invoice, will not be interested in dropping load. So something causes it. One, assuming that the gas supply stops supplying at that particular time, then is bound to get out of the grid. Either 1 unit or 2 units or 3 units, or the entire unit of a generator. So when that happens, there is this struggle of stabilizing the grid. It does not mean that the transmission line has any problem. No, it doesn't mean that. But what it means is that the grid network, when we say the grid is not only transmission network. The grid encompasses every value chain that plays a role towards making sure that there is stability in the grid.
Okay.
That's what it means. Now, there is also another problem. Assuming that a generator has a mechanical problem that it didn't foresee, along when it is operational, then there's nothing you can do about it. It would actually
Why that balance is very important is because most of the generators are rotating machines. They are rotating machines and they are designed to rotate within a particular frequency, that is number of revolutions per second. That is why we have that concept of 50 hertz supply. So the machines are designed to operate at a rotating speed of 50 hertz. Now that balance, that equilibrium on the demand side and the generation side is what keeps that frequency at 50 hertz, which gives the generators the comfort to operate in stability.
Okay.
Now, if for any reason there is a mismatch on these two sides of the scale, for instance, assuming there is a major loss of load, if we are looking at the example of Engineer Eji of 4,000 megawatt being generated and being consumed at this point in time, and there is a major loss, we suddenly lost, let's say, 500 megawatt. What happens to your balance? This side is lighter by 500. This side is heavier. The stability is no longer there, so it tilts like this. Okay. This tilting is the disturbance that affects the grid. Now, these rotating machines that are designed to run at 50 cycles now have lighter load to push. So meaning that the energy they are pushing to drive 4,000 megawatt of load is now being used to drive 3,500 megawatt of loads, meaning that they will tend to move faster than what they were beautiful. To do. So the frequency will now shoot beyond that 50 hertz that they are designed to operate with. And that is a problem for the machines because they are not designed to rotate at that speed higher than that 50 hertz. So one of the things that will now result in the cost of collapse under situation of such nature is that the generators that are designed to run at 50 hertz now have the tendency to run faster than that. And because if they run faster than that, there's a potential consequences on those machines. So they are designed also with some protection schemes that will ensure that they don't run beyond the speed that they are designed to. So their tendency is that protection will tell them, look, you are running into a risk zone, so you have to isolate. So once one isolates, that means if you are able to isolate just the same 500 megawatts on this side, for instance, that means your generation has suddenly become also 3,500 to match the load that is now 3,500 because you've lost 500 before. So if you are able to establish that within the fractions of seconds that the system needs to respond, then you maintain stability.
But you know, I think we've got the you know the meaning now. We've understood. At least I have understood what is meant by, you know, collapse, grid collapse. But the concern or my what I don't understand is how that will now affect the entire country and throw the entire country into blackout. Because you're supposed to have you have different stations that are serving different, you know, regions and all that. So when this happens, say let's say in Afam, how does that affect the areas that Afam doesn't serve?
Yeah. So there are.
I don't know. It sounds. Yeah. I hope I'm making.
It's also a concept that we all need to understand. In the operations of the power system, there are universal factors and there are local factors. When there's a problem that is localized, it impacts only on the local side where that problem exists.
Precisely.
But when you have a universal factor, that one cuts across the entire system and it impacts on the entire system. And that key universal factor is this frequency. The frequency is universal. So if there's a problem in Abuja, the frequency will dip in the same way across the entire system, not only where the problems exist. And that is where the entire system has to respond simultaneously to be able to protect itself from the dangers that this frequency excursion is likely to give to the rotating equipment.
Did you understand the frequency matter?
I'm not sure. It's like for those of us who are in the arts, it's sounding more like mathematics. And you can imagine when someone doesn't like mathematics and the teacher of the child sends him home with mathematics for the parents.
Let's escalate the question. Escalate.
But let me ask the power infrastructure consultant, from your end, what's the reading, what's your understanding of what's happening? Because I know that the TCN officials haven't quite talked about the possibility of aging machines along the value chain.
Thank you for having me. The explanations that you had from Transmission Company of Nigeria, that is the technical details explanation of what is grid instability. And when there is grid instability, it leads to system collapse. And then system collapse means the entire country is in blackout. And there are so many reasons, like they have said, that is responsible for the system collapse to take place. Some of the technical issues that they explain, which I am not a technical person, is that there is a system, okay, that is monitoring the entire activities of the power itself, the generation, and then the distribution. Transmission, they are at the center of taking power from generation and transmitting the power to the distributor. But what I want you to understand is, okay, it's an issue that is the entire business of the day involves the transmission, the generation, and the distribution company. Therefore, what that means is that these three stakeholders in the system, they are actually supposed to work together, to be working together 24 hours a day, to make sure that if there is a signal, if on the frequency relays deploy, it means that there is a fault that needs to be addressed. Therefore, where is it coming from? Is it coming from the distribution side, or is it coming from the transmission side? If it is coming from any of those major sections, it means that communication, effective communication, should take place to avert a system collapse. Is that happening in the sector at the moment as we speak? I don't know. But I do know that before, all right, when the sector was not privatized, there is what we call the coordination meeting of the three arms of the enterprise: the generation, the transmission, and the distribution. They work together, they communicate together in order to resolve issues that would adversely affect the disruption in power supply. Is that happening now? If that is not happening now, it is a critical area that needs to be looked at. It is a critical area that must be, all right, enforced to make sure that transmission does its own part, distribution does its own part, and then the generation does its own part. But the most interesting part of this discussion is distribution is privatized. Generation is concession, is all privatized. The weakest link of all these three is the Transmission Company of Nigeria. Precisely. If you have privatized the two major operators,
value chain, yes,
value chain, and then the transmission network that is charged with the responsibility of evacuating power is left without the funding that is required. If a system collapse happens, who are you going to blame? Why are you blaming transmission?
Okay, I think I get where you're driving at. But let me bring in Mr. Lubio because I trust you will come down to our level because we are our own people.
I've had equilibrium of darkness, organization. We need all this drama to go to Renchi for us to have
understand. So you will come down to our own level, and I'm wondering also that between August last year, according to the data we have, and December 2023, we had as many as between 8 and 11,
officially recorded system collapses.
So
no, I'm speaking. I have the floor, Dr.
So
let me speak. Let me speak to that. As a young lad, I know we have retired that kind of stereotype, grammar. They say low hydro. The professionals then, because it was because of frustration from lack of electricity that made people like us to be interested in what is happening with the power sector. Nigerians now should appreciate, and we are equally creating some younger generation of Nigerians to show interest in the power sector, because sometimes when I post issues to people on power sector, I even have to send data to them to read. They say, oh guys, this morning, say, so that's the problem we have. I haven't come to that. I've had equilibrium of darkness, synchronization of darkness. Yesterday was Valentine, and it was Valentine of darkness. System collapse is not happening now because there will be availability of power on the grid, but the transmission company of Nigeria have been able to manage it because they use frequency relays, knock off Ikeja up, knock off major consumers of electricity that are industrial, that are bulk users of electricity, that they are being on grid, supposed to translate to job creation, wealth creation, and social stability. Because when people's energy, the used energy are constructively engaged, their mind will be taken away from devices. So we are stabilizing, the stability we are having is because there will be availability of power, but you knock off supply.
Are we really having stability?
No, what I'm saying relatively is that if you see that there are challenges, you quickly deploy if there's a power swing, like I said, you quickly deploy the frequency relay to knock off some major supplies and stabilize the grid. Coming to that, we are running a Bole-Kaja grid. There was a time I had event I'm from Kabata in Kogi. I had event in Berak event in Kaba, and somebody was offering me a Bole-Kaja to transport my guests from here. I know Bole-Kaja, is it that it breaks down in Lokoja? Is it that it breaks down in Obajana? Even when you have kidnappers, you need a vehicle that is machine that can move it around with high speed.
I was going to ask you to translate that budget.
What Bole-Kaja grid now is that we are running 19th century grid in the 21st century. Let's face this fact. One, like he has said, just like what we have in the NNPC, in 1993, when there was June 12 crisis and the refineries were shut down for the first time, and it didn't work, Kokoria and others didn't work for 6 months. By the time we tried to bring up the machines, the bearing have not been oiled for 6 months. The machines supposed to work continuously without a stop. So by the time you shut them down, no oiling, no this thing, it's difficult to bring them back. And now between 1993 to date, the number of recruitment that have been done under NNPC that the refineries have not been working, I will say without apology that we employed not less than 2,000 to 3,000 staff in the NNPC that don't have refinery. Now, we're still talking about retirement benefits. We're talking of allowances where you have 5,000 people recruited without a functional office. They just go there, play Ludo and what have you. So what we have in the power sector is quite appalling. I recall that with my interaction with the immediate past administration, the highest commitment and volume of resources that have been put, foreign loan, you ask for it, President Buhari will approve. So the issue is not the resources. You privatize generation. You privatize distribution. We have some interest group where the transmission is left as a cash cow. If you need to pull out funds, if you need to put constituency project, if you need to put budget under this, you put in that transmission because the business model of public sector managed enterprise is not about profit making or efficiency.
So are you putting the...
I'm putting the blame...
Yes, are you putting the challenge squarely at the doorsteps
mismatch.
of TCN.
No, what I'm saying is that federal government has the right to set policy direction and provide leadership. If we don't do the surgical here, Asiwaju will demonstrate all the intention and we'll still go back in vicious circle. Let me come to it. For example, now, I was a member of the Technical Investigative Panel on Power System Collapses. In 2013, there was a fault with a breaker in Benin. If you have equipment that was manufactured in 1958, like for example, Engineer J knows that for some distribution injection substation, the grid is not automated. You go to a distribution. I have privileges of entering distribution injection substation. Transmission Company of Nigeria, from the radiation of electricity from 33 kV feeders to the injection substations. They're supposed to be like an interface technology that will monitor. Now we still use phone to call, drop load. There are great indiscipline, even at the distribution injection substation. A substation may be nominated certain amount of energy to peak. Maybe there are demands, they exceed. In that manner, now if you have a transmission grid, most of the equipment, okay, is it that Nigeria don't have money to procure SCADA? I was in the meeting in 2013, TCA headquarters. We've been talking about SCADA since 2013. Why has it been difficult for us to have an effective SCADA? Most of the equipment we have in place, whether we like it or not, defective system protected devices are different layers. Take for example, there was a fire incident in Apple transmission substation. How much will it cost federal government to buy a thunder light arrestor? Thunder light arrestor is like the arrow you have on top of a substation. When there's a thunder lightning, it will come as a safety valve. So basically, our equipments are obsolete. It's not that we are not getting the resources. I can vote for Engineer J not because he's there, of his pedigree, because I know a lot of job he has been doing as a market operator. You want to take some decision, there'll be political interferences.
Sorry, I know you've talked a lot, and I know Victor wants to come in, but you've talked about infrastructure, obsolescence
of infrastructure.
Are you also ruling out what Engineer AJ and Engineer Mohammed Kabiru also talked about, the supply side? Yes, the supply side, you know, the gas supply side.
Okay, one, if everybody is going from Abuja to Lagos on a one-way single-lane traffic, with the volume of vehicle we have now, you know what it means. Our major concern is that the radial system, the transmission line that is carrying a load, the load for a wheelbarrow or a small car, you cannot put the load of a trailer, artisanal vehicle or a high-capacity vehicle on a wheelbarrow. Like I've said, we need to invest on super grid. If you have a monolithic grid, for example, as he's talking about, he's talking about system planning, system coordination, or what have you. You have a single radial grid that once there's a power swing in a particular part of the country, it will push the load. Then everybody will start dropping load. The TCN have been able to control and manage great system reliability and stability because they use frequency relays to once there's a distortion. He has not even spoken about vegetation control. For example, now, if you are coming from Asaba, Ebu Ila, that is in Delta State, you are coming from Asaba to Ebu Ila, going to Biaja and what have you, you see that there are vegetation like rubber plantation under the grid. They struggle with the grid and sometimes they cut the grid. They are very invasive. Now, when last did we invest so much on vegetation control? It costs a lot of money, but are we doing that? No. Then he has talked about lack of equilibrium of generation, transmission, and distribution. We have never exceeded 5,800 megawatts. If we attempt to exceed that alone, the grid will collapse. One, we need to invest on, instead of the radial monolithic this thing, we need to make the what you call maybe double line circle, triple line circle. We need to have alternative so that once there is a challenge on a particular one, you can swing. Look at what happened.
Okay, go ahead.
I think we are getting to a point where the trader in me is beginning to understand.
Look at what happened in Kanji.
No, well, we've gone around talking about courses, and then Kunle is talking about we need to, as if we haven't done enough. I need to understand this, Engineer J. Every year, from time to time, from administration to administration, you hear trillions of naira being voted for electricity. Why does it seem that this doesn't make, any impact in the power sector? Because like I said, I don't need to understand all these technicalities. I don't need to know the technicalities. It's your job. You just get, power supply and I'm happy. So why does it seem that the amount of money that goes into the power sector does not bring about power supply to the homes and offices of Nigerians?
Yeah, thank you. When I was in the university, if a lecturer comes in, teaches, the next lecture he comes and asks few questions. If people wobble, he says, look, gentlemen, the last lecture we have to repeat it. You know why we have taken time to lay the foundation of defining and explaining what is system collapse, system failure, as people might want to call it and all. It's just to lay that foundation that people will understand.
Precisely.
Yes, people will understand and stop casting aspersion wrongly. Stop buck passing, wrongly. That's why, in fact, when I heard I'll be coming here, I said, it's a good opportunity. So many media houses have been inviting us, but sometimes you think it's not necessary to go and begin to do defensive work. But here isn't here. Everybody listens to and watches this particular station, and therefore we deem it fit that this is the right place to come and do better explanation. I and my colleague, we have laid the foundation what system failure means, what causes system failure. We have harped on those things.
Yes.
Now, you talked about, so I'm coming to your question, please. You say, why is it that problem happens here, it affects any other place? Yeah. I will tell you that when we say grid means the generators in Nigeria, about 27 of them, are linked up with our highest voltage level, which is 330, that are linked up. So any breakage will affect the others. Exactly. So now, why you would not regard yourself as a layman, you are not concerned with technicals? I want to disagree with you, interviewer. You need to know, because if you go buy a new phone, definitely you will learn to operate that phone. If you buy new television, you will be forced to learn how to do it. You will not say, my kid, go and do it. If it's not there, you don't watch television. That's why you have to be technically biased, whether you're a geographer, historian, or whatever it is. So that be the case. Now, the power industry is a huge industry. It is pivotal to industrialization. It's pivotal to every other thing you can think of. Today, people depend so much on extractive industry to increase the GDP and all the rest of them. But it is not so in so many other countries that are landlocked, but they have power to generate, they have power to industrialize, manufacture, and do every other thing. So that the populace would be well equipped with disposable income to be able to pay for electricity. Today, you and I know what is happening in the country. It is not peculiar to Nigeria. You see people running away, I want to jackpot, I want to go here and there. Ask truly what is happening where they're going. Things are not easy again. You need to face the reality where you are. If the things are easier here, then the federal government wouldn't be spending this humongous amount of money trying to intervene. Sometimes you call it subsidy. Yes, time for subsidy probably has gone. But what the federal government is doing today is intervention. Intervention means you want to disrupt the negative flow of unacceptable event. That's why the federal government is intervening today, putting a lot of monies, because they know that electricity is the pivot of any country's development. If they don't do it, tell me where we'll be. Some people are arguing, oh, why would the federal government do this? Now, why would people now talk about palliative? Why would we now justify palliative if the federal government is taking the burden to intervene to make sure that the downtrodden Nigerian sees light? That's why they are injecting this money. Presently, 450 billion have been earmarked for the fiscal year. That's what they will do, because the cost reflective tariff, average Nigerians will not be able to pay it.
I'm not sure you have managed to tell me,
yes,
why so much money. My question was,
yes,
we have so much money has been sunk into the power sector through the years.
Yes.
Why does it seem that it is not providing commensurate supply to the homes and offices of Nigerians?
Good. It is a relative term. When you say so much have been injected, it's not giving you commensurate terms. If you generate 4,000 megawatt and you sell 4,000 megawatt, whether that 4,000 megawatt enjoys subsidy or intervention, it will not exceed at the end of the day. The generator brings his invoice, the distribution company pays, if service provider pays, what you have is null, zero balance.
Yes, I think Dr. Eje, thank you, because
yes,
even from what we heard yesterday in terms of the financial liquidity of you are owing the gas companies in billions of dollars. You are also owing debts 1.3 trillion, and then your subsidy is running to how many? 2 trillion. So you really have a lot of expenses to deal with. So I don't know how much of your budget would be able to cover up, just to respond to my colleague here, Victor. But Mr. Libio raised quite a number of issues bordering on infrastructure, quality of the infrastructure that the TCN has at the moment to be able to deal with the issues of grid instability and all that. And he also referenced what is happening in other climes, how they manage their electric power distribution and all the systems and all that. So how would you respond to the issues that he has raised in terms of your capacity to manage this instability?
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate Olubio. And you see, when you have side and 11 players are playing the field, you play better than all of them. But when they substitute you with one, you go there, you see what it is like, and that becomes actual. Now, tell me what happens when the grid is operational and somewhere along the line, vandals bring down a tower. For instance, between December to date, we have had 6 towers on ground. Between Gombe and Damaturu, they brought down towers. Between Damaturu and Benishek, they brought down towers. Between Bauchi and Jos, they brought down towers. People don't see it. Transmission company cannot be magician to make sure that those things don't happen.
No, but we understand. Sorry, sir. We understand that.
Yeah.
He was specifically, talking about addressing the issue of the equilibrium, the instability in the value chain. Yes, and that you don't need to bring down exactly. This has to do with automation and technology.
Yeah, you see, it's easier said than done. We have technology. I will leave my colleague when he talks now to talk about the ringing you're talking about. We've run away
and he also talked about coordination and communication, effective communication, that does not happen, among the value chain, among those who operate the system?
That's an allegation. He was in Abuja. He led the issues. I know he's an accountant, by the way. So he will not tell me that there's no coordination between the value chain practitioners or the operators. They always meet.
Mr. Mohammed is a consultant in power infrastructure.
Yeah, he was my former boss.
I want to believe that he has the expertise and he knows what he's talking about. So, and I think it would be good.
Yeah.
It would be good for us, since we're having this conversation, to speak, to the issues, to speak to the truth, so that we understand. That's why we're here. We are not having face off. We're having a conversation. He has raised an issue about effective communication. System. Yes.
Yeah.
So
I will tell you. Yes. I will tell you that all those things are happening. There's constant communication across the value chain. It is happening. Forget about SCADA. Yes, technology and all the rest of them. You talk about SCADA. I tell you that today, by next year, the SCADA project that is being put forward would be ready. And then before that one, we've been using all sorts of communication. Modern, it's not tech. Do you know what is IoT? We use Internet of Things. We use so many of them, and we are having overlap and seeing all the generators in the country. So it's not a matter of whether technology is in or not. Let's
allow you to take a break.
Now, Kunle's talks tends to be pointing somewhere. And I did raise that issue earlier, that somehow, when you were trying to, note where the issues are, you didn't talk about aging facilities, aging machines in the value chain, which becomes your business. Except you tell me now that all your machines they are good to go, yet we don't have power. Where is intervention needed in this value chain to get power to Nigerians?
Yes, thank you very much. At the center of everything, just like Mr. Mohammed Idris mentioned, is the issue of coordination and collaboration among the stakeholders. And for us in TCN, that is number one in terms of operating the grid. Because we have a central control center, which is our national control center at Oshobo. Its primary responsibility is to coordinate all these stakeholders in ensuring that we achieve this smooth, synchronous operation of all the value chain. So that is being done every day, every hour, every minute to ensure that all the operators are in touch with the grid controller to make sure that they do what they are supposed to do. So the entire operation is done based on that collaboration. We plan ahead. Every day, we plan for the next day. Each operator will tell the national grid controller, what am I capable of doing tomorrow? What am I capable of doing tomorrow based on its own assessment of each facility, which includes the condition of their infrastructure. So the distribution system will declare what they believe they will be able to do based on the capability of their infrastructure on a day ahead to the grid controller. The generators, individually, all the 27 to 29 generators that we have, will communicate to the grid controller what they will be capable of doing tomorrow. And of course, the transmission system also will declare the availability of what is there. And those information form the basis of the planning of the electricity we are receiving now based on the information received yesterday. So collaboration is there. And on hourly basis, we also have a coordination that is being done based on discussion to discuss challenges as we operate the system today. We have currently what is called the NESI Situation Room that is coordinated by the Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission. All the operators that are operating in the grid meet in that NESI Situation Room and they discuss issues that concerns the grid operations and where interventions and improvements are required, and the relevant stakeholder who is supposed to take action on those issues note it and take relevant actions, and they give feedbacks on a regular basis through that situation room, and all participants are involved in that situation room. So to address the fact that he's not sure whether coordination is happening or not, there is no gap in terms of coordination as far as the system operations is concerned for now. What we can say is that there's always room for improvement, and that TCN and the grid operators are looking forward to various means of achieving improvement on a daily basis, which we will get to. And from the Olubi's comments, yes, he raised a number of issues, particularly regarding the infrastructure. He specifically talked about one of the problems of the grid is because it's radial, and that is why we are not able to wield the power that we are supposed to wield. I bet to tell you, Mr. Olubi, radiality in a transmission system is simply to say that certain segments of the grid, of the transmission system, are only connected to the rest of the system through one single point. If you have any segment on the grid that is connected to the rest of the system through only a single connection point, then that segment of the system is called a radial part of the system. But as long as that segment has alternative connection points to the rest of the grid, to say that it has more than one point through which it's interconnected with the rest of the grid, that part of the network is not radial. And when you look at the national grid as it is today, I can tell you that we don't operate majorly a radial grid. We operate majorly a loop grid. We have the areas where they are radial, and we know them. If I can tell you, specifically when you look at the 330 kV grid of the Nigerian system, there are only 3 segments that you can call clearly as radial. All the remaining part of the grid is looped. And these 3 areas I can mention to you is between Kano and Kaduna. From Kaduna going to Kano is radial. Then from Jos to Gombe is also radial, which extend down to the northeast. And then we have Kainji to Birnin Kebbi. These are basically the only segment that you can call radial on the grid. But every other segment of this grid has alternative route through which power can flow in the event that there is an intervention or an event in one of the interconnection sites. So all the rest of the grid is looped, and power can alternatively flow across the system in that situation.
So why do, if everything is okay and things are being done, you are willing excess supply to more industrial, whatever, and you have all the effective coordination and communication, and so why do we have this constant, again, I don't understand. I know you're doing your best, you're trying, but Mr. Mohammed, Idris Mohammed, you are an expert in electricity infrastructure. They claim you probably are not up to date with what is happening, but you do know, modern infrastructure that can prevent this frequent grid, instability. Can you give us an idea what those in the value chain, the TCN and the GENCOs and the distribution companies can do so that we can begin to move forward and achieve our objectives? I don't know. Okay, I'm told that we will come back to you after we go on a short break. You're watching Good Morning Nigeria. Please don't go away. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back to the program, and we're looking at grid instability or what you know as grid collapse, and we have the experts right here in the studio. Very interesting and enlightening conversation indeed. Just before we went on break, I wanted Mr. Idris Mohammed to, probably speak to us on, infrastructure needs for not just TCN, but also for all those involved in the, electricity value chain.
Okay, thank you for having me once again. We've had a very interesting session in this discussion. And I believe that some of the best brains that we have in the sector are here having this discussion. Engineer AJ, Engineer Kabir, I have worked with them in different locations. They are one of the best engineers that you can get in the system. But you have to understand that they represent a transmission company of Nigeria. And then they have limitations as to what they can actually say. What I said, all right, is that if effective coordination is taking place, there will be no system collapse. Because from the system, he has told you that something will tell you that the system is unstable. And if there is an information, early warning signal that tells you, okay, you check me, you need to check me, you need to check me, otherwise I will go off. And then still you allow it to go off.
Is there technology? Is there a technology?
There's a technology.
A technology for that to
That is what the under-frequency relays that helps them to manage the grid. But that is, by the way, the most important thing that we should take away from this discussion is that transmission is the weakest link. Generation has been concessioned. Distribution has been privatized. Well, they have all been privatized, so it is expected that the new owners will inject the required funds to maintain the service level agreement, the performance agreement that they signed to own those companies. Are those things being checked? Are they just being there and then you forget about them? I do know that the federal government of Nigeria, from 2013, when those companies were privatized, the federal government has invested, has spent humongous amount of money in order to improve the quality of service delivery in the power sector. What is happening? Nothing is happening.
But those companies are also owed huge amount of money, amounting to, yes.
If you say they are being owed, how are they? What is responsible? All right, for their being owed in the first place? If you are talking about the distribution companies, they need to invest in metering. So it is not anybody's responsibility for you as a company to know that your main source, your cash cow, all right, is to invest in metering. You are not investing in metering. You have people enjoying free electricity, bypassing meters, and then you say somebody who will go and collect the money for you. You bought the business because you have the capacity. You said you have the capacity to turn around the system. And then I want everybody to know in this country that the power business is one of the most lucrative business anywhere in the world. It just takes prudent management, transparency, all right, and coordination on the part of the major players. Kunle has already mentioned that transmission is the weakest link. Transmission has aging machines. Transmission also, if you look at vegetation control, he has mentioned areas that when you see, all right, you will be alarmed. There is no vegetation that is allowed to be under the transmission.
Even structures in some lines, houses
in those areas, skyscrapers, or let me say skyscraper, high-rise buildings under transmission tower. That is death. Death on the way. So what is really happening is that, is the government really intervening in order to get the desired result? If the government is intervening in order to get the desired result, then why is transmission having aging machines? Why is transmission not being eventually, put in its proper perspective so that good result will be coming out from it? Just like the generation companies, a lot of them improve generation from 100 megawatts to
You see, now that you've talked about, you mentioned metering along the way, in addition to, because if you want to believe that if government is unable to fund power on its own, you open up to investors to come in under certain terms, which will be agreed, and you get power to the homes of people. And who benefits from not having meters? Why are we running on estimated billing in many parts and having meters in fewer parts? Who benefits from this, for instance?
Yes. Okay. Let's Kunde Odubio, speak to that, because the issue of metering. I know we also have our local metering company somewhere in Zaria. What is being done?
The Zaria one is a relic. I know it's quite close to John Hood, Chikaji, and what have you. It's a relic of this. Technology has generation. I talked about 19th century generation TCN equipment being run in 21st century. If you look at the refinery that we have, Port Harcourt, Kaduna, I've lived within Kaduna refinery premises, Sokoto Road, where you have most of the MDs. If you look at the refineries we have in Port Harcourt, Kaduna, and Warri, if you are asking for $5 billion to do turnaround maintenance, it's a cash cow. It can only refine a specific type of grade of crude because it's an old technology refinery. And most of the money that the federal government, you see a situation where there will be judgment debt against federal government, and you put a voucher. Those within the system will syndicate and say, look, this one now, okay, you have judgment against federal government. Okay, put our own, get it loaded. The Nigerian mindset has to change. The Dangote refinery is a 21st century technology that can refine any type of grade of crude. So, and it can be monitored. A modern grid is automated. He's talking about system planning, system coordination. We are not saying TCN is not doing enough. For example, if there is a fault at the downstream of the discos, I have sympathized with the staff of the disco. Nigerian engineers are magicians. You see them like Babalawo looking into the bush. They are saying they are doing line tracing, fault tracing. Do you do that when you have technology like fault locators? Technology that will help you monitor the system? Now, why I talk about radial system, loose system, ring system, I sympathize with the engineer there and the other gentleman here because they are representing institution of government. And they must be seen to be here to speak, to project and protect the institution of government. If we have a tower, there are GPS. I've been to Moma's office in Lagos. We are from Lagos. You can monitor the highway. If somebody beat the traffic light, you link their BVN to it. This is a technology. You don't need to chase them. In the US, if you beat traffic light, they come and give you your token and you go and pay. So what we are saying is that if we have a transmission infrastructure, there's a challenge of tower. Somebody is even coming to come and attack a tower. You are not monitoring it. You want to do like Babalawo, you expect. You don't use manual this and there are technology and there are equipment. Now, if you have a challenge in Bauchi, for example, how do we isolate that particular area that it don't affect the whole grid? Now, if they are supposed to be like a fire incident like happens somewhere in Nigeria, as a Kanji or what have you, there are fire sensor alarms. There are different layers of system protective devices.
So ultimately, what they're saying is that
they are defective.
Needs to be automated. They need to be technology compliant.
They need to be upgraded. I know engineer AJ and engineer Kabir as individuals, they are upgraded. They are not Japa here, but the system needs to be upgraded.
Yes, but let me also bring in here.
You talk about metering.
Because the new Electricity Act, has empowered state governments to generate their own, Will that in any way help to defray this instability, in the, I don't know. Yes. Is that a possible solution?
Well,
energy needs.
You see, on metering, first and foremost, you see mass metering is going on, and you ask who who profits if it's not metered and all the rest of them? If disco customers are not metered, everybody is losing. The disco themselves are losing, and the market itself is also losing.
Demand will be less.
The demand will be less, and because you now estimate what you didn't see. That's what it means. But if everybody is metered, as the regulator is making frantic effort to see it is done, now you see a sanitized market. You see, when you say digitalize everything, you yourself also need to be digitalized. Everybody, there's no loop. If you have a digital machine and you analog, it will not work well. If you say there wouldn't be any house along the transmission line, and somehow somebody is building there, and the same person will come out and say, TCN, you are not doing well. And when there's any line strap, it burns the place, and TCN will be blamed. You understand? Which means everything is not in sync with what is supposed to be. Today I tell you that there is relay. We have distance relays that would, you talk about fault locator. Distance relay is a fault locator.
I'm talking about the distribution. I'm not talking about
distribution themselves.
They look, the line tracing, fault tracing, as if they are looking for rats in the bush.
Yes.
We need to go because our time is almost spent.
Yeah, thank you so much. So that's the thing. TCN is doing everything to make sure that any fault that will be localized within TCN grid is eliminated. But the only thing is that TCN is pivotal. It's at the middle, just like Kabiru said. You know, it is here trying to balance the activities of generator. Also here trying to balance the activities of the distribution companies. And as a result, somebody can afford to say, TCN is the weakest link. It is not the weakest link. It's the strongest link in the value chain.
My question, you still have not. Yes, okay. I'm just wondering.
If that sounds better.
I'm just wondering how the new Electricity Act that empowers the state governments, how that impacts on the challenge we have at hand.
Yeah, it's yet to be tested. If you look at the economy we have, it's an ideal thing to say, okay, let us localize the distribution companies, the state government will have share and manage, have their own act and do all sorts of things. But then, if I am an actualist, I look at the real aspect of life. Now, you see the federal government is bearing a lot of burden on itself, trying to intervene, trying to subsidize and all the rest of them. The question is, when the state government takes over, would they have the funding to also do that? As a result, taking over of generation and distribution would have to be qualified by each state. Each state can define what they want to do. Some of them can go into industrialization, create industrial cluster, and do standalone generation and service those areas.
Okay, we want to quickly so that
we need not to misconstrue the role of the state government. There have been attempts in the past by state government to partner with investors to generate, transmit, and distribute. Precisely. The existing grid now is going to be managed by the federal structure and NEC. State now in advancing energy mix. The investment by state is not going to be on the grid. So that cluster or sector-specific generation, states will now have the capacity to create enabling environment, give licensing, have their own local regulatory agencies or commission or what have you, so that there's a place in Kosovo, they got facility from UBA and some banks. They could not operate using dependent power, this renewable energy. They could not operate because the distribution company there, Kosovo is a border town, is quite viable. Ibadan Disco, I've been talking to the management. They could not give them permission to go ahead. They are not even the conductors were there before privatization. It was not linked to the grid. Let us use this conductor. But this landlord rent-seeking mentality and say, this is our this thing, they refuse to allow them. So now they don't need to go to bureaucracy of federal government. Yeah. They go to state government. If you have your money, you can generate, you can distribute, you can, transmit within the state, not to the grid, so that we have alternative. Because if you have a market that does not provide alternative to consumer, the discourse, like you have said, metering and what have you, why they will not meter is that they know that estimated billing is a cash cow. So it's an institutionalization of inefficiency.
It's a question of cash cow to who?
To them, to the discourse.
We just have a minute or so to go. Maybe in 30 seconds you can tell us what improvements need to be brought in to ensure stability of the grid on one hand and ensure generation, improved power supply to the people.
Thank you very much. Actually, yes, the need for improvement cannot be overemphasized. And key in terms of improvement has to be embracing of more technology, more emerging technology is very, very important. There are a lot of artificial intelligence technology, Internet of Things technology that can help improve the level of collaboration that is required to ensure seamless operation among the various operators within the system. That has to be done, and TCN is already working on it. We have a research and innovation department that is really working on this, and we have already developed certain solutions that are impacting right now on the grid.
Idris Mohammed, how can we protect our infrastructure?
In 30 seconds.
Just to make sure that there is that coordination that I talked about from the beginning, that coordination is actually maintained to a functional level that will give the desired result and ensure that system collapse does not happen. And then to improve electricity supply, the devolution of powers for state governments to also now participate in the running of electricity will certainly boost
so that they can take responsibility when there is none
in the country.
Idris Mohammed, Power Infrastructure Consultant, thank you very much for your time on Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you.
Appreciate
you.
Engineer Edmond Eje, we also thank you for coming. TCN. We thank you, Kabir Mohammed, Adamu Mohammed.
Kabir Mohammed Adamu.
Adamu for coming on Good Morning Nigeria. Thank you. And Kule Kola Oyubiyo, who is of the Consumer Protection Network president. We thank you very much for your thoughts on Good Morning Nigeria. Yeah. Let's take some sports.
The Confederation of African Football (CAF) has released the full list of the 2023 Africa Cup of Nations starting 11. The tournament, which took place a month, commenced on January 11 and ended on February 11, 2024 in Abidjan, Côte d'Ivoire. Super Eagles trio William Troost-Ekong, Ola Aina and Ademola Lookman were included in the best 11. The three players were recognized for their impressive performance for the three-time champions in Côte d'Ivoire. Troost-Ekong was named player of the tournament, scored 3 goals for Nigeria in the competition. Host Côte d'Ivoire, the new African champions, have 3 players named in the best 11. And Nigeria international Sir Daza scored 2 goals to help Rangers defeat visiting Rose Country 3-1 in the Scottish Premiership on Wednesday night. Dazas gave Rangers the lead in the 5th minute before getting his second to put his side 2-1 up 5 minutes into the first half at a time. The Super Eagles striker has taken his goals tally in all competitions this campaign to 14. And in tennis, Rafael Nadal has put his return to competitive tennis on hold after pulling out of the Qatar Open. Nadal, 37, made his long-awaited return after almost a year out with injury at January's Brisbane International. However, the Spaniard sustained a hip injury at the tournament which ruled him out of the Australian Open.
All right, let's quickly take some foreign stories now.
The United States on Wednesday hailed NATO's announcement that 18 members have met a defense spending target following threats by Donald Trump to encourage Russia to attack allies that do not spend enough. NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg said that 18 out of 31 members were meeting the alliance's goal of spending 2% of gross domestic products on defense, up from 11 last year and just 3 in 2014. He said the organization will continue to see progress from other countries towards meeting those targets and will urge those who have not yet met them to continue to take steps to do so.
As I said earlier this week, NATO is an alliance that the American people derive tremendous benefit from, provides some tremendous security to the United States, and that's why we have seen durable, long-lasting, widespread support, not just in Congress, not just from leaders in Congress, but also from the American people, and we expect that to continue.
Meanwhile, the Israeli military said a soldier was killed in rocket fire from Lebanon, while Lebanese official media announced that 3 civilians and a Hezbollah fighter were killed in a series of Israeli strikes. While the rocket fire was not immediately claimed, the exchanges raised fears of a broader conflict between Israel and the Iran-backed Hezbollah movement, which have been trading near daily cross-border fire since the Israel-Hamas war began in October. The Israeli army said in a statement that 20-year-old Sergeant Omar Sarabenjo was killed as a result of a rocket launch carried out from Lebanese territory on a base in northern Israel. The military said fighter jets struck a series of Hezbollah terror targets in several areas of South Lebanon.
All right, many thanks, Kenneth, for the foreign story. And that concludes our program for this morning. Good Morning Nigeria returns again tomorrow morning, and tomorrow is a Friday. I am Claire Adilabu Abdurrazak. From me and my colleagues and the GMN crew, have a pleasant day.
All right, and I'm also thanking you for staying with us. Wish you a pleasant day. I'm Victor. Also, thank you for watching.